about the gym, about training and so forth. And I begin the day by talking about a kid I knew when I was growing up. And it kind of relates to weight training a little bit, and it kind of relates to a lot of different things. But through elementary school, the kid genetic ability was pretty terrible. Okay, picked last for most of the sporting events he participated in. Was labeled dyslexic, learning disability, and kids would make fun of him. You know, he'd get beat up, you know, coming home from school at least once a week through elementary school. Then about age of 13, was introduced to weight training. And the more he began to train with weights, the more his confidence grew, everything else grew and followed with that. Through time of all the weightlifting, he got associated with powerlifting about the age of 14. Started competing in the sport right from the get-go. There was no bodybuilding training or other kind of training. At that point, started reading and studying and trying to absorb everything that he could in regards to strength and conditioning, because it was the only thing that he felt part of. You know, because he never felt part of this group, never felt part of this group, always kind of an outcast. So now all his new friends were, you know, older guys from the gym who were showing him how to squat, how to bench press, how to clean, how to snatch, how to do all these different things. Well, throughout his time in high school, and because of the confidence that built up, worked himself up into, you know, elite powerlifter before he left high school. Barely got through high school. Barely. You know, slid by through the skin of his teeth. Once again, because of being labeled with dyslexia and having to tutor all the time and everything else. Went on through college and graduated from college and continued with the powerlifting, built the powerlifting up to the point where he totaled 4 elites in the sport of powerlifting. Graduated with a degree in exercise science and is speaking in front of you right now today. What I'm going to try to present to you today are all the skills I've learned through that process. And when people present and say things about genetic ability, it pisses me off, okay? Because it's all bullcrap. There's no such thing as genetic ability, okay? There's mental ability. I've seen people, and right now we're writing something for Louis in the gym based upon how we mentally perceive certain things, how we handle the pressures of being at Westside. I've seen Westside Barbell, I've seen the pressures of Westside Barbell make people run out the door. I've also seen those pressures build people up to enormous levels. I've seen people with superior genetic ability run out the door. I've seen other people that I would consider one step away from being mentally retarded, total elite. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to go over, I'm going to show you how to do that with the training. And I'm going to show you how you mentally have to program yourself to be able to achieve the things as well. Because I strongly believe from my own experience and from the experience I've seen from other people, anybody can total their elite. Okay. Now, getting further than that, I'll be the first to agree, you're going to need a little bit more genetic ability and a little more time. Okay, a kid 13 years old aspiring to be, you know, one of the best powerlifters in the world had a lot of time. Somebody who's 34 years old still has 20 years, but to get to a level where they're 300 pounds over their elite might be a little more tricky if they don't have the genetic ability. Okay, but everybody in this room can total elite if you have the proper training and the proper mindset, and that's what we're going to show you today. Can you see that all right? The numbers? Anybody? Anybody? I feel like Ferris Bueller. Going back to my history a little bit in the sport of powerlifting. You're going to see here towards the far, I guess that would be your left, far left of the chart, there's a 1440 total. That's one of my first meets ever. Okay? Through high school and through the first part of college, I worked my total up into an 1830 in the 220 class, which would have been very close to my first elite. It may have even have been my first elite. Okay, that was using progressive overload, the Western method of periodization, which we're going to speak about a little bit later. Some of the other styles of training. Like I said before, I was fortunate in the respect that I never had to go through what a lot of you guys had to go through, of just going to a gym and working out and trying to get strong. Okay, I had pretty structured training all the time. Okay, Mike's getting out there, so you might want to go out there. Throughout that time, I've learned a lot about training for being a high school kid with dyslexia and a learning disability. I didn't care about algebra, I didn't care about spelling, I didn't care about any other stuff. But give me a muscle and fitness and an Ironman, I can tell you everything that's in there. Okay, and that's all I read at that time. I didn't know any better to look for any other sources. But the network I had, the lifters I had, were fair lifters. And Ohio is a great powerlifting state. You know, I don't know how many of you are from Ohio, but you got Black's Health World, you have Westside Barbell Club, we had, you know, Toledo Powerlifting Club. All these different people helping me out, showing me along the way. Whenever I go to a powerlifting meet, there's always somebody there to help me out. So because of all that help, is how I ended up totaling my first elite. When you jump off the chart here and come over to the purple section where you see there's 2 zeros and then a 1620, that's when I started bodybuilding. I spent 3 years bodybuilding and competed as well, a few times. Stuck with it until I actually did well in a show, because I figured the reason I don't like bodybuilding is because I'm not doing very well. All right. I can honestly tell you bodybuilding was a waste of my time. Another thing that happened between that 1830 and that 1620 over 3 years, my body weight went from 220 to 255. The 1620 was at 242. So my total dropped about 200 pounds. My lean body mass went up about 200 pounds. The reason for that is, as we're going to discuss later on today, bodybuilding training will never make you strong. If it did, the guys in the gym with the biggest arm and the biggest chest would be the strongest guys in the gym, and that's not the case. You go to any powerlifting meet, you're going to see big guys, but they look nothing like bodybuilders do. They look more like what football players should look like, okay, but don't. So the moral of the story is, a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to do bodybuilding type activities and compound it with powerlifting training. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. For that 1620 total, I did have 8 weeks that I cycled for that competition. And there's nothing worse than cycling for a competition and getting crushed with weights that you used to smoke when you were a teenager. Okay? Some other changes that happened during that time. When I went into bodybuilding, my waist was too thick. So we had to spend a lot of time trying to bring my waist back down in. My lats weren't wide enough. So I had to spend a lot of time trying to build my lats out wider for the bodybuilding. My upper pecs were too flat. So I had to do all these physique changes in my training. But then when I went back to the powerlifting, I didn't have the thickness in the waist to support the weights. Okay, I didn't have the thickness in my back to support the benches. Now I know this. You know, back then I didn't know that. And then I went back into, jumping back over to the right, my right, went back into powerlifting. I stayed with powerlifting with the progressive overload style of training. This would be through my college years. Now keep in mind, I met Louis when I was a little kid, okay? Matter of fact, when I was in high school, I bench pressed against him in a competition, and he benched 5 something, you know, low 5s or whatever. I think I was a 242, he's a 242. Everybody back then, you know, because you're a kid, kind of brushes you off. You know, very few people actually take the time to talk to you. Well, Louis took the time to talk to me during the meet. I had another gentleman in my class, I can't remember his name, but he had a beard about down to here. And Louis's always been a joker his whole life, and he still is now. So he come up to me and he said, don't worry about the guy's third attempt, he's going to miss it, he's going to bring the bar down, it's going to hit his beard, it's going to pull his head off the bench, and then he's going to press it back up, and they're going to red light him because his head came off the bench. Well, that's exactly what happened. Okay, so I ended up placing second to Louis at that time. I believe it was a Marion bench press challenge or something. I pressed a 450 or somewhere in the neighborhood like that. But I never really understood what he was talking about or his style of training. And even way back then, he was still doing some type of progressive overload training, which a lot of people forget about. And if you read some of his older stuff, you'll see that. You know, they criticize his training methods and say, oh no, you need to do this stuff, but they seem to forget he spent 20 years doing that.